Welcome back. You know, tomorrow at the state capitol, the Judiciary Committee is going to hold a hearing on a bill to repeal the death penalty here in Connecticut. Now, 2 years ago it passed, but the governor vetoed the bill, virtually killing it. But now our new governor, Daniel Malloy, says if it passes this time, he's going to sign it when it reaches his desk. Joining us to talk more about this issue, New Haven State Representative Gary Holder-Winfield, instrumental in getting it passed 2 years ago, and Adjunct Professor Chris DeSanctis from Sacred Heart University, your proponent of the death penalty. I'm going to start with you, State Representative. What's your litmus test? Going to pass again this time?
I believe the bill will pass. I think it will be a much closer margin than last time, but I believe ultimately it passes.
Chris, what do you think? You've always talked about the fact that it's sort of a silent majority in Connecticut. You think people want to keep the death penalty as it is? True?
Well, I think all the polling shows that. Quinnipiac has Connecticut at 65% support for the death penalty. If you look at atrocious crimes, overly atrocious crimes with what happened in Cheshire, Connecticut, I think that rises significantly, almost to 80%. That reflects the polls nationally. It even reflects the polls regionally in Europe. People support it.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Let's talk about Cheshire home invasion.
Sure.
Stephen Hayes, the suspect, who a jury found him guilty of the crime and put him right to death row. You think, even though they debated the issue there, does that put more people in favor of the death penalty or show the problems with the system?
Well, I think it shows a lot of different things. I think it shows that the appeals process needs to be reformed. I think it shows that there's definitely a deterrent when it comes to the death penalty. You know, look, as far as Stephen Hayes is concerned, and the death penalty in Connecticut, we just don't, we put people on death row, but we never execute them. And so we never see the benefits in Connecticut of the death penalty. There are over 27 studies that show the death penalty deters between 3 and 18 murders per one person executed.
Do you agree with that, Representative Winfield? Do you think it's a deterrent, really?
I don't believe it's a deterrent, and I would say to Professor DeSantis that most of those studies have other studies refuting them. One of the problems that you see with those studies is they never separate the death penalty from the type of punishment that's issued for crimes, period, within a state. And so while it may appear that the death penalty, using certain methods, certain regression techniques, appears to be a deterrent, that may not actually be the case.
When people see the Cheshire home invasion, they hear about the evidence photos, how heinous the crime is. How are you going to convince lawmakers this time to repeal the death penalty? Do you argue strictly cost?
No, I think arguing strictly cost is a bad way to go. Cost is a factor. I think I begin with saying that the representatives are part of government, and government has an agreement with the people, an exchange that's fundamental to government, which is to provide security. I think we all start there. I think once the individuals who've committed not just the Cheshire crime, but any of these types of crimes is in prison, we've actually met the burden of providing security. If we're going to take a step further, I would need someone to explain to me why we're taking that step, and not believing that deterrence is one of the results of the death penalty. I'm not sure what that further explanation for doing so is.
Professor DeSanctis, just a quick thing. What about the impact on the victim's family? You know, I covered the Stephen Hayes trial, and
Sure.
having to watch Dr. Pettit every day and his extended family
Sure.
sort of relive this, and with all the appeals. Is that sort of one of your arguments?
Sure. Well, absolutely. You know, people who are against the death penalty say, you know, the death penalty has to go because families of victims have to go through this terrible situation. But it's not the death penalty. It is the appeals process. You reform the appeals process, and families of victims do not have to suffer the way they are. If you reform the appeals process, the state saves money. It's not the death penalty that's costing the state money. It's the appeals process. And third, again, if you reform the appeals process, more capital offenders are executed, and we see the benefits of a deterrent effect and innocent lives being saved in Connecticut.
And it costs about $14 million to process, I think, each death penalty crime. One last question to you, Representative Winfield. Do you think all the publicity about Cheshire home invasion, and, you know, politicians have to get reelected, do they vote their conscience on this one, or do they vote popularity?
I think similar to whether there's a deterrent effect. I don't know how you disaggregate all of this. I think I think the popularity of the case, I think the publicity of the case are factors, and they go into a mix of things which determine how people will vote on it.
Professor DeSanctis, do you think this is going to be a lot of rallies at the state capitol? Do you think lawmakers will be lobbied?
Oh, I think they will be on both sides. It is interesting. The polls always show that more people are in support of the death penalty, but when it comes to rallying and voting, the people on the other side who oppose the death penalty seem to rally a little bit more. You might have experienced something different, maybe better organized, and I don't know why that is, but.
Well, we're going to keep tabs on this as you're lobbied, and as sure as you weigh in, we want to thank New Haven State Representative Gary Holder-Winfield and Professor Chris DeSanctis from Sacred Heart trying to hash this out. I know you can't do it in a short few minutes, but we appreciate you coming in. Again, the Judiciary Committee going to take that up first thing tomorrow at the state capitol. For more on this issue, log on to our website at WTNH.com and click on the Good Morning Connecticut Weekend segment.